Hello, humans. Um, I'm here today to talk about Sagittarius Rising. It's so funny. I was like just trying to feel into the charts and the archetypes and yeah, kind of listen to what Sagittarius wanted to say about itself. And then someone asked, "Where's the Sagittarius video?" And I realized no one had asked that before. No one was wondering about Sagittarius, and I didn't realize that's what I needed, someone to invite me to speak on that. Um, yeah, there's my undefined throat in human design. Okay, so Sagittarius rising. It's almost like they're too busy seeking everything around them, one thing at a time, usually. But kind of the serial monogamy of like mastery and curiosity, as opposed to Gemini, which is kind of more of like the polyamory of interests. Um, it's almost like, yeah, why would they search for a video like this? They are mystical wanderers, often on their own path with their own kind of core of fate following that. And I think you have to be suspicious even when they kind of ask direct questions, because they have been seeking those questions in deeper ways. So, Sagittarius rising, if any of you watch this, welcome. Hopefully, I have some nuggets for you along the journey, along the mutable fire journey. So, this is part of my series of the rising sign as archetypal life paths that looks at the rising signs not just in the context of the first house, but in the implication of using a whole sign house system. I'm emphasizing that only because I always get comments on these videos saying like, "Oh, my houses don't line up." Yes, your houses don't line up in a default system, in the Placidus system, in any kind of quadrant system. This only works for whole sign house systems, which is the ancient technique. But if you use any kind of slightly advanced astrology software, you should be able to change the house system to see your chart like that. So this only works for that. Okay, Sagittarius. Sag in the first house. In my own practice and study of astrology, I have been really feeling how the mutable approach to life is so different. And so, right, we've got three different kind of qualities of the signs. We have the cardinal signs. They initiate, they're always reacting, they always want to move on to what's next, they're starting things, they're excited, they're not sitting still, right? This is the creative cusp of everything. Then we have the fixed signs, and the fixed signs want to burrow down and find the answer and live the answer and structure it and feel like they know and become the thing that's in the essence. I think if you think that the essence is a solid thing, that is kind of the colonialism of the fixed signs. If you think that the essence of yourself and reality is a process, then that is the essence of the mutable signs. So that is Sagittarius, Gemini, Virgo, Pisces. And in mutability, you never trust that something is as it seems. You never think that you're seeing the whole picture, right? There's a relentlessness to mutability, right? Sagittarius, they're always trying to seek, right? The seekers, the Geminis, they're always talking. Virgos, always analyzing, always purifying, always trying to gather all the pieces and figure out which ones matter and what's the best order to put them in, right? And Pisces, incessant feeling, absorb it all. Whoa. So, Sagittarius risings. These are the people that come into the world and they think and they learn. I don't think that our rising sign comes so much into play until we turn 12, because that's our first annual perfection of the first house. When you're 0, right, you're kind of encountering, there's lots of other stuff going on, but it's not so personality, right? You don't have a self-concept. Kind of, that's the project of it. So once you can kind of develop that self-concept, Sagittarius risings are heretical thinker, magic, mystic wizards. But because it's fire, this gets performed. This happens very quickly. This moves across them. It's Jupiter. It's thinking bigger. And it is the work of Jupiter that is to create meaning from the suffering of the world, right? So this sign comes after Scorpio, where we said, to really become whole, we're going to burrow in and we're going to look at the shadow. We're going to look at the shadow of things. And we are going to ask what the lies are. And in Sagittarius, there's a desire to transcend that darkness by seeking out the light and by kind of metabolizing it all into a belief system that guides your little boat on the wild ride of life. And for Sagittarius, it has to be a wild ride. At the core of Sagittarius is the thirst for adventure and the desire to make maps of new experiences and new lands, right? No one is brought more alive by the thrill of dopamine and discovery than the sign of Sagittarius. But that's not the whole story. So let's get into the whole story. I'm going to pull up a chart that does not have any planets in it. But it will show us the map of Sagittarius rising. So here we have Sagittarius in the first house. Like I said, the first house having to deal with our self-concept, right? What do you think your role is in the world? Well, for Sagittarius rising, it is to seek and to find, to translate suffering into meaning, to be a teacher and a student, a questioner, and to be willing to break out of what is familiar into what is not familiar, but not in the sense of Scorpio, which is always seeking, right? Like what is in the counterculture necessarily, right? Sagittarius question is, what is beyond? How can I ask the questions that will open me up, right? To be a Sagittarius rising is to be a child of Jupiter, and the part of Jupiter that's really about the life of the mind and mastery and optimism. So it's adventure in the mind expanding way, right? You want to see new things that challenge your beliefs, and then you'll get kind of pulled on to something else. We want to especially look for where Jupiter lies in the chart of Sagittarius rising, because that is going to be the most important context for the self to feel empowered for the work. That is kind of, right, that's going to be the location that a Sagittarius rising will rely on to build up their sense of self. So we've got Jupiter somewhere. Okay, now the second house, resources, supports, right? What is coming up to aid that, right? Well, Capricorn, as the sign of tradition, of institution, will take the ideas, the creed of Sagittarius, and will build systems and institutions around them, right? This is the ability to put things into form, to master resources, right? If you're going to go on an epic adventure, you need to plan ahead, and that's Capricorn, right? You need to make sure that you have enough food, enough resources to actually go and do all the exuberant Sagittarian wandering that you need to do. So we need to look for Saturn. Now, I think there's also when Saturn is in the second and the third, right? It makes me think of, or Saturn at least rules the second and the third. The beginning of any hero's journey, and I think with fire signs rising, we're always talking about the hero. The beginning with any hero's journey is having the current state be a wasteland, be impoverished and restricted in some way, whether that is, whether that is literally or whether that is psychologically, emotionally, spiritually impoverished, right? You have to be in a wasteland for adventure to call to you. And that wasteland can even be boredom. And it often is with Sagittarius rising. So you need to get organized before you go. And then the third house is the place of communication and the clarity of thought. And I often think of Sagittarius and Aquarius as kind of some of the most similar signs in the zodiac for their love of truth. Now, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, so that's going to be an exuberant, meaning-filled truth. And Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, so that is going to be a more rational, less emotionally involved, less exuberant truth, right? With Aquarius in the third house, right, your familiarity is the unfamiliar. And that is what is important for Sag, right? The pursuit of the unfamiliar, of the foreign. And if you have that kind of Aquarian out of the box, always feeling like a foreigner in the third house, which is your neighborhood, the people around you, if you are kind of surrounded by oddballs and that you don't have much ties toward, right? Aquarius, the sign of freedom, the sign of exile. You're an outsider, you're also more free to go. So you organize all the stuff with Capricorn. You're not really tied home. We're going to look for Saturn to see any complications or nuances to that story. Now, the fourth house is Pisces. So this is important because when you're a Sagittarius rising, the fourth and the first are the two Jupiter houses. So your family and your identity are often tied together because they have the same ruler. And wherever that ruler is, right, is going to give us the clues of what's going on there. What is your chart oriented towards? Now, with the fourth house in Pisces, we get a few different pieces. We get universality in its most beautiful and sad forms. Right? So the beauty of a fourth house in Pisces is that belonging can happen anywhere, right? Your family is the universal, right? Your family, your history, your true lineage is a connection to how we're all one, right? How there's only one flesh to wound. You come from everywhere and everything, right? Your heart is connected. Now, how it often shows up, right? Pisces is the sign of things being completely undefined, right? No boundaries. And if you go into a family and there's no boundaries and there's lots of enmeshment, the chaotic soup that can happen, the emotional overwhelm that can happen, can feel really difficult to kind of keep your head above water in that soup. There can be a tremendous amount of grief and pain involved in the lack of boundaries. And now this will depend on where Jupiter is. So yeah, it can kind of go both ways, right? There's the connectedness, and that can create faith, and it can also kind of create a sense of drowning. I think part of the connection between the first house and the fourth house, the way that I kind of articulate the difference between Sag and Pisces, is that Sag is the belief and Pisces is the faith. And I consider belief to be in the language of the mind and thoughts, and faith to be more in the language of the heart, right? The exaltation of Venus is Pisces. And that feeling of intuitive fate, that inner way of knowing, which is Jupiter, right? If Jupiter is knowing, we've got, I think I know, and I have faith. And right, there's a kind of beauty in the fourth house in Pisces that faith should be the foundation of belief, and the fourth house is our foundation, right? That without a strong foundation in faith, belief becomes dogmatic, because faith is the place where things can be playful and move around. I recognize that some of these words can be triggering, especially when we're talking about God. So hopefully it's landing okay. Fifth house. I love the fifth in Aries because it just makes sense, right? That the fun house would be the Aries house. I feel like I'm going to do it, so I'm going to do it. I'm thinking of, yeah, that there's this kind of exuberance, this impulsiveness to the fifth house. The fifth house is the like fuck around house, and the sixth house is the find out house. And Aries loves to fuck around, right? What happens if I poke this bear? Right? We're looking for Mars to feel the fifth house, right? And this is kind of like, how can I use humor to rise above the grief of the fourth house, which again is a special talent of Sagittarius, right? Is using humor. And they often have great senses of humor, right? So we've got the fifth house kind of saying like, whoa, I can get really sucked into the quicksand of Pisces, into that, or really eat a lot of lotus petals and end up lost on Circe's island for 5 years. And Aries is like, oh, time to go, right? We're gonna go, and then we're gonna check what we need, right? So there's that square to Capricorn. Capricorn in the resources house wants to plan it out, but Aries is like, I'm going on a day trip. All I need is half a water bottle and my bike. This can be part of the shadow. And we'll get to it, because with Sagittarius rising, you have the 5th house and the 12th house ruled by the same planet, right? Fun and decidedly not fun, or type 2 fun for sure, but maybe type 3 fun, which is just not fun. So we got to check on that, right? But we also, if we take the divine view of the 12th house, we have playfulness in the 12th house. So connected to the 12th house. So we'll see. And it's going to depend on your placements as a Sagittarius rising. Now the 6th house. The 6th house with Sag rising is complicated, because the 6th house has to do with how we treat our body and feed ourselves. It is the house of illness and the house of injury, the place that we need to go to when we need to heal our physical body. But I think having Taurus in the 6th house can also create lifelong issues with food, right? or lifelong, there's like a food complex. It doesn't necessarily need to be an eating disorder or something, although, right, when you have Jupiter ruling your ascendant, right, this is the planet of expanse in the house of the self, there can just be weight issues in general, right? And then depending on the chart, the corrective measures that we take to that, right? Food is either the helper or it is the enemy, right? How do you nourish yourself? How do you keep pace with yourself, right? And I often think that we can feel a kind of condescension towards whatever sign we have on the cusp of the sixth house. We kind of feel like, oh, that's beneath me. And Taurus, right, is materialism, not in a pejorative sense. It's food, it's these daily rituals, it's this daily rhythms. It's also our connection to place. It is the most placey place of all the signs. Right? That's going to be the connection to the physical land. And if you're Sagittarius rising, in some ways you need to have a little bit of sense of contempt or condescension towards the simple life, because otherwise you would never be able to be an adventurer and leave. So there's a little bit of contempt there. Now, this can also be the day job. And so I think, right, if any of you are Tom Robbins fans, the genius waitress archetype is a Sagittarius rising, because often Sagittarius rising with Taurus in the sixth can also work in food service, especially if there are prominent placements there. And so we've got the genius over here and the waitress over here. There's Tom Robbins, genius waitress archetype. Yeah, we're going to look for Venus. I'm going to look for Venus. And so, right, if Venus is well configured, then this house tends to be totally fine. Right? We've got a benefic chart. This is the house of the other benefic, or one of the houses of the other benefics. Beautiful. Okay, the seventh house, Gemini. All of your, right? The first house is I'm a Sagittarius, I master things and I make meaning. And what do I need to balance myself with? If I go and find the answer, I need other people to ask the questions. So we have Gemini, the question askers, lots of different things, lots of different forms, right? For me to wear all of my different masks as that Sagittarius, I need mercurial people to balance me, because what I'm trying to do is distill, right? Think alchemy. The alchemist is a good metaphor both for Sagittarius and Virgo, and Virgo is the 10th house of Sagittarius. So right, we've got this distillation process, but you have to have something to distill. And so, right, with Mercury in Gemini, it's gathering all the information to distill. Mercury in Gemini does all of the research and then, or gathers all of the things, and then Sagittarius is going to distill it down into, okay, what does this mean? What does it mean? How can we map it out? What are the implications? You go do all, or I'll go do all of the investigation, and then I need to write the story. That's Mercury in the seventh. I think there can also be kind of a signature for either having romantic relationships really needing to have a friendship basis, or for polyamory, right? There's a kind of, right? Gemini is a sign of the multiplicity. This is what I need. I need other people to ask me questions. I need lots of ideas to engage with. And sometimes that all comes from one person, or sometimes it's going to come from multiple people, right? And you can kind of choose. And the way that, you know, our lives provide the flesh of our charts, it looks a little bit different. So that's not necessarily true. Look, I'm giving so many different options for how the Gemini house can show up. Duh. Okay. 8th house, the interpersonal shadow of Sagittarius. What you get when you have made the commitment of the 7th house. What are the riches of the 8th, or the dragons that you get access to? Well, we have Cancer. There is their heart, their desire for commitment, their desire to have someone to come home to, the tenderness of being in the inner circle, right? This is the orbit. Here's the moon. And indeed, Cancer is the sign of the exaltation of Jupiter, right? The ruler of the chart. Jupiter is fertile. And so when we've got Cancer balancing Sag, or we've got these Cancer placements, this is the sweet, juicy tenderness. Yeah, I think, right, there's no better use for the word tender than the 8th house. And I think that can also show up with, when you get close to them, how you need to treat them, which is quite tenderly. Right? Sagittarius is a nomadic wanderer, and inside a nomadic wanderer is the heart of a child that longs for home. Of course, right? Especially if there's wounding in the 4th house story, right? No one has to go out thinking that the world is their home if their home provides the basic developmental needs. That's what Cancer does. So this can also be a context where in intimate relationships, Sagittarius rising needs reparenting, needs some mothering, and that might be the only place where they can feel safe enough to be vulnerable enough to ask for it. In the 8th. So lots and lots of gentleness. Conflict, it's just going to be too sticky here. Yeah, keep it in the like play fighting. Wrestle with them for the conflict, right? These intimate spaces, safety is key. Okay, 9th house, Leo, right? Who needs to be seen in their dominant belief systems more than Sagittarius, right? If you're going to be a missionary trying to sell your ideas out in the world, you got to perform them in a Leo space, right? This also makes a very powerful teacher, right? Teachers standing in front of classes are performers. They are, right? And their ability to be compelling is in their embodiment of the ideas or of the learning of the ideas that they are speaking about, right? Their effectiveness depends on whether they can bring it alive and make you feel something. And that's Leo in the 9th. Do I have anything else to say? No, I don't. Right, we're going to look to the sun for the secrets of that house. Now, Virgo in the 10th. Oh, finally we get to some kind of paradox with them, right? Virgo in the 10th. Virgo does not like to be in the 10th. Virgo is a wonderful servant and a terrible master. So why put it in the 10th? You know, I had one Sagittarius rising that I was close to say, like, someone just looked at my chart and my midheaven is in Virgo and I'm going to be a servant for my whole life. Like, no. I don't think so, unless you're like a servant in the sense that like that's your day job. Again, food service, genius waitress, while you're like at night down in your like alchemy lab discovering gold. No, Virgo in the 10th, right? Why do we need Sagittarian answers? Well, we need them to heal the world, right? Virgo is the healer, ultimately, right? Is the fixer, is the setting things right. The purpose of discovering the systems of the world and of processing and understanding truth is to understand how things are put together so that you can understand how they're broken. And in Virgo, willing to kind of change yourself towards perfection. And so the perfectionistic tendencies come out here. But hopefully Sagittarius doesn't get stuck on them for too long, because that would crush their spirit. And we look for Mercury, right? Healers. Okay. Then we have Libra in the 11th. These are your friends, your allies, your audience. And this is where you take those ideas of the world, you put them into their proper proportion, you offer them back in a way that balances and makes harmony. And that's what Libra wants to do. Wants to take the abstract ways of thinking and our assumptions and make it make sense. And so, right? And make it beautiful. This is the other sign ruled by Venus, right? So we've got these two benefic signs. Let's make the world right. Let's fix it. Let's fix ourselves. And we want it to feel good. And let's have fun while we're doing it. There you go. Libra in the 11th, right? And a mutual appreciation for, truth is beauty, beauty is truth. There is Libra and Sag together. And Scorpio in the 12th, the blind spot of the chart, the place where we trip over ourselves. And this is the optimism of Sag, thinking its poop doesn't stink. Possibly, right? Or it can get lost in the 12th, right? Especially those Sages that might have Saturn there, can be, right? We've got, the sign of death and rebirth in the house of loss. This is some dark stuff that can live there, some, right? It's the void inside of ourselves. It's the stuff that we're afraid of inside of ourselves that compels us into this whole project. And so, right, it can show one of the setbacks of Sag is trying to outrun things. Right? Instead of facing our demons, trying to transcend them. And that can be a good thing, honestly. Right? Sagittarius is a response to Scorpio. It doesn't want to go get lost in those swamps. It wants to go farther, not deeper. And so, but sometimes if it overlooks something in there and it's neglecting something in there that needs some help, it comes out in pretty intense ways, right? The darkness in your 12th house when Scorpio is there can be quite dark. And I think the other side of that is in, right, Scorpio being ruled by Mars and the cruelty, right? The callousness of Sag can be cruel in Scorpio. There can be, right? If you need to travel the world, you can't really sit there and listen to exactly what everybody else is saying or what they're feeling. And you have to sometimes brush people off, and that hurts. That hurts them. Or sometimes when you need to make meaning and find answers, your research is not as thorough. Or sometimes if you have the answers before you ask the questions, then you're going to overlook anything that doesn't agree with you. And that is Scorpio in the 12th. Okay. Well, that was my wild ride through Sagittarius Rising. Let me know what resonates. Let me know if you have questions of things I didn't get back to. I love hearing how this shows up in your charts, how it does or doesn't. Again, this is whole sign houses, so if you're using a quadrant house system, it's not going to line up just as pretty. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more of this type of content, please like it, subscribe, and share it with other people who might like it. Makes such a difference to me. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you next time.